So moving on to our next panel discussion, followed by the audience question. I would like to call upon the moderator of the discussion, Dr. Manali Rao. You all saw her dance. She's a Bharatanatyam dancer. She's a general practitioner and diabetologist with 9+ years of experience. She's a family physician and lifestyle medicine physician in Fortis Hospital, Mulund. She is consultant at Goki Technologies. Expertise in the diabetes, thyroid, polycystic ovaries, all the non-communicable diseases that we talked about today. Trained in yoga and a professional Bharatanatyam dancer. May I call upon the stage Dr. Manali Rao.
Let us now move on to the most awaited panel discussion. I would like to introduce a few of our panelists. Dr. Sanjeev Khanna, he is a consulting medical gastroenterologist in Holy Spirit, LH Hiranandani and Criticare Hospital. 15 years of experience as a DNBE teacher, trained in endoscopy at a pioneering center in Hamburg, Germany, actively participates in national seminars and continuing medical education programs, senior advisor of PAN Mumbai chapter, avid sportsman and passionate dog lover, dedicated teacher and reliable friend. Welcome, sir. Dr. Vrinda Kulkarni, she is an MD General Medicine. She is teaching faculty from 1993 at TNMMC and BYL Nair hospitals. Currently Professor of Medicine and in charge of clinical hematology, teacher for general medicine, mentor for fellowship in clinical hematology, on a plant-based diet since 2020 and whole food-based diet since the last 8 months. She is also an advisor for PAN. Dr. Kaushik Bhojani, Director, Rheumatology Services, Fortis Hospital, Mumbai Cluster. He has published 16 publications, 15 national and 1 international, 11 poster presentations, chapter on septic arthritis in Manual of Rheumatology, MUHS approved teacher for rheumatology fellowship, areas of special interest, systemic sclerosis and SSC overlap syndromes, bad obstetric history. Dr. Danesh Chenoy, physiotherapist, sports and manual therapy, psychologist and coach, experienced public speaker and facilitator, author and newspaper columnist, an expert at intrapersonal and interpersonal communication, MPT Sports Physiotherapy in 2010, 50+ publications with 81 citations, 4 textbooks and 3 patient publications, served for more than half a decade in East Africa in different countries to help develop physiotherapy profession. And I also request all our speakers to kindly come up on the dais. A warm welcome to all the panelists. So my first question will be to Dr. Bhojani. Is there any association of gut health and autoimmune diseases?
Thank you. So there's data and there's evidence. So what Dr. Vertikar spoke about in terms of the evidence and the articles, and he spoke about the bikinis. Here you don't need to worry about the bikinis. Here you have evidence. So in ankylosing spondylitis, it's been proven that there's a direct link with gut health. There's inflammatory bowel disease, which is associated with ankylosing spondylitis. There are biopsies from the intestine, which have shown that the bacteria of such patients in the intestine are different from what you and I would have. And so there is a direct association of your sugars, your processed foods, and all of that. And in fact, this is something that I used to do even before this biopsy came out, that you would actually induce, you do a gut washout with laxatives for the weekend and give them probiotics. And a lot of them used to actually improve symptomatically in terms of pain. Now this data is gradually coming out in other places, but you can't do clinical trials in more serious diseases like lupus, where the patient has a life-threatening disease, or a scleroderma, where the patient has a lung association. But there's no harm in just modifying their diet and seeing what happens. Data is coming out in rheumatoid arthritis as well.
Thank you, sir. My next question is to Dr. Sanjeev Khanna. He has recently published his article in BHJ. The article is on vitamin B12 and non-vegetarianism, myth versus reality. Sir, many patients are recommended B12 supplements now, but why not take B12 supplements from non-veg sources instead? And are there really any reliable plant-based sources on B12?
Thank you, Dr. Manali, and great being with all of you and with Pan India and hopefully Pan Global very soon. Dr. Manali, you know what is a rhetoric question?
No, sir.
Rhetoric
What is
question
it?
is, something which suggests its own answer, which you are asking me. So it's like something which, when I walk into the hall, usually late for conferences, Dr. Rupa looks at her watch and says, do you know what time it is? So I'm not supposed to tell her it is 12:20. It is like that. So आपने जो सवाल पूछा है उसका जवाब आपके सवाल के अंदर ही है. And as far as whole food plant-based is concerned, friends, I am a fledgling, So do you know the story of Einstein and his driver?
No, sir.
Okay.
Kindly
So-
enlighten
yes,
us.
yes, great. So you're among the few people whom I can still enlighten. So I'm so happy about it. So Einstein, was when he was at his peak, he had given hundreds of lectures on the theory of relativity, and he was getting fed up. So one day he was called to give a lecture, and his driver was with him, and he said, "Let's do one thing." His driver's name was James. He said, "James, you give the talk today, and I will sit in the audience." So James said, "If somebody asks some question, what will I do?" So he said, "Don't worry, we'll find out some way about it. But you have heard me giving this talk hundreds of times, so you can answer most of the questions." So they bought one wig on the way, like Einstein's frizzy hair, and Einstein wore the driver's cap and sat in the audience. And the driver gave a fantastic lecture, and then at the end of the lecture, somebody stands up, and you know how people ask questions. Sometimes they know the answer, but they want to test the speaker. So ask the question. And he asked some very complicated question on relativity, which the driver got totally fussed about. So he was nervous, and then he looked at Einstein at the back of the row and said, "Oh, such a simple question, even my driver can answer it." So it is like that. All our speakers so far, including, we got an illustrious line here. I'm a fledgling in whole food plant-based. I've come up here just in the last 3 years, and we have got stalwarts sitting here, Rupa Ben, Dr. Vaswani, Rohit, Sharang, Smriti, the whole GR who's come all the way, and so it's like the Einstein and the driver situation. So let me just recap, and everything is already spoken. B12, yes. Coming back to B12. Sharang is there to keep time, on me. So I will just say, please go back on YouTube, see his talk, and the answer is there. But just to summarize quickly, when you take B12 through non-veg foods, which are certainly better, you come with a big negative baggage. And what is that baggage? It's been spoken ad today morning. The saturated fats, the trans fats, the carcinogens, the advanced glycation end products, the TMAOs, and finally what I call crap foods. Crap is calorie rich and processed. Okay, that is crap food. And all that increases, we know, our incidence of cardiovascular disease, our cerebrovascular accidents, or cancers, gut, uterus, breast, all are related to all this. So there is no question. Type 2 diabetes, which he mentioned so eloquently, Dr. GR also mentioned that. And type 2 diabetes, there's a fantastic paper in the Lancet of this year in Jan 2025. And they have studied not one or two, they have studied 19 lakh patients. And they've followed them up for many years, and they've unequivocally proved that the incidence of type 2 diabetes goes up the moment you take animal-based food coming in with all this. Apart from that, antibiotic exposure has been mentioned. You want to get nice dose of salmonella, please eat eggs. You want to have recurrent urinary tract infection, please take chicken, and so on and so forth. I could go on. So that is a short answer to the whole question which you have asked. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My next question is to...
So, I mean, one thing I would just like to add on to the whole thing, that B12 is not made by plants, it's not made by animals. Okay, it is made by microbes. Okay, and these are found in the soil. Previously, because of the contamination, the soil used to be good. These microbes used to make B12, and that used to get absorbed into the plants, and that is how we used to get the B12. Now the soil is completely contaminated, so we don't get, the plants don't have enough B12, so we have to supplement. If you stick to a whole food plant-based diet, best to check your B12 levels and probably take a supplement. Or you can take fortified foods. In my chart you saw I take nutritional yeast that is fortified with B12. So I check my B12 levels. So far I have not had the need to take B12 supplements. The other thing we need to understand is that animal sources are also now becoming deficient in B12. So it is not that if you are a non-vegetarian, you will not have B12 deficiency. In fact, in Sir's paper itself, he has shown that a lot of B12 deficiency is found in non-vegetarians also. So because what are the animals being fed? That same food, right? And that food also does not have. So in fact, animals are also now being given B12 supplements so that humans get the B12 from them. So this is the industry-driven thing to keep us hooked on to animal food. So they tell you, "Arey, ye khaoge to you will get B12." But the animals are given B12 supplements. Then we are eating the animals. Might as well we take the B12 supplements.
And very important to that, what Dr. Sharang said, is that the animals are given dead animals as their feed. And that really perpetuates the whole cycle. And to add to a point which he made out beautifully, that bacteria are the source of our B12. And you know, when it reminds me of a famous couplet that when you look at the moon and you say, "Ay Chand, tu apne aap pe jo itna itrata hai, ye mat bhool ke tu zameen se hi nazar aata hai." So the bacteria which are our humblest coexistents are our most important friends for manufacturing B12. And you keep your gut bacteria happy and in good shape and have the right bacteria, you will by and large not have a problem, even as a vegetarian, even as a whole food plant-based diet, because your distal ileal enterohepatic circulation saves your B12. Your enterorenal circulation saves your B12. You have mechanisms there to retain whatever B12. And Harrison says that unequivocally, that if you have a good distal ileum, you will hardly get into a B12 problem, even if your diet does not contain these superhuman doses of B12. So B12 is conserved by the body beautifully, provided we. The problem is that as Indians, we have a very poor distal ileum. When I do endoscopies, colonoscopies, I have friends here from gastroenterology. Siddharth is there, Vasa, who's worked so much with me. And when you go into the distal ileum, you see non-specific ulceration in most Bombay-ites for no reason. You take a biopsy, you get some non-specific ileitis, nothing is shown. It is not Crohn's, it is not TB, it is not Salmonella, and our bad distal ileum. We are becoming world leaders now in all these diseases: Crohn's, celiac, SIBO, a whole lot of things which Giardia, which affect our small bowel, and that is why we are getting into B12 deficiency. So keep your gut healthy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. My next question is to Dr. Rajendran. As CVD in younger patients is increasing, can we just add statins to everyone as a primary prevention step? And do you prescribe statins? If so, when?
Why not? Give statins to everybody. No. Okay. If I will give statins to everybody, if it is going to get rid of the cardiovascular problem, 100%, which doesn't happen. So the best of the trials have shown only 30% reduction in mortality with statins. And we all know that statins do reduce the cholesterol, but do not reduce the other lifestyle other metabolic risk factors. In fact, it can promote diabetes. Okay. There was an interesting paper in American Journal of Cardiology in late 90s when the statins had come into the picture, saying that must be something called as mexstatin. Has anyone heard of mexstatin? So they advised McDonald's to give statin along with the food they give. Okay? And finally, they thought it is very foolish. And in that, they said you have to have a disclaimer saying that this does not substitute for all the bad food which you had. It's as good as saying don't come here and eat better food at home. Okay? So it is not universal for everybody. So second question is on, the other thing is, I have heard in certain forums saying that the statins must be diluted and put in the water tank so that everybody gets the benefit. Okay? So it's important that we realize the drugs which we prescribe are also affecting the environment. Say, for example, metformin is found universally in all contaminated waters. So does statin. Okay? And statin has been harming the aquatic animals in their reproduction. So it is important that we stop blabbering these things. That, okay? They are useful. So that's the reason why I do also prescribe. Okay? In what context? Suppose somebody has had an acute myocardial infarction, I cannot change him the next day into a whole food plant-based diet person. So I would definitely like to stabilize his plaques. And if the patient has an proven IHT, and in primary prevention, if there is a very strong family history, and in familial hypercholesterolemia, even the statins and with the diet, we are not able to achieve. So those are all patients in whom definitely I will prescribe. And in people with multiple risk factors and CT coronary calcium, which is positive. Otherwise, I give them this thing. I say that when you start, it's going to be lifelong. So why not give a trial? And patients, like for example, the one which I showed, one lady who had a bypass surgery and had a drastic lipoprotein loss, her statins, her LDL is less than 40 now. So it's possible to bring down without drugs.
Thank you, sir. My next question is to Dr. Vrinda Kulkarni. Ma'am, what is the role of whole food plant-based diet in cancer prevention?
Thank you, Manali. India has a huge burden of cancer patients, and cancer is seen in younger individuals as well. Now, we say that there is a genetic risk and you are genetically predisposed for cancer, but genes are not everything. And we just heard that genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. So lifestyle disorders, lifestyle factors can be modified and we can reduce the risk of cancers. More than 40% cancers are preventable if we address the lifestyle factors. Now, before understanding the role of whole food plant-based diet on cancer development, we must understand how does cancer develop? What are the various different mechanisms by which cancer development occurs? So, cellular stress, chronic inflammation, dysregulated gut microbiome, chronic inflammation, chronic conditions like diabetes, obesity, exposure to carcinogens, all these factors lead to cancer development. So if we tackle all these, the whole food plant-based diet, as we know, is rich in phytochemicals, and these phytochemicals have antioxidant effect that prevents DNA methylation, which is the trigger for cancer development. Fiber is the most important component of whole food plant-based diet, and we have heard so much about fiber. So fiber helps in the gut microbiome. Once your gut microbiome is healthy and with diversity, it prevents leaky gut and chronic inflammation. Similarly, fiber has a role in disposing of all the exogenous carcinogens. Animal food contains nitrosamines, which are directly carcinogenic. Processed meat is group 1 carcinogen. Similarly, red meat is group 2A carcinogen. So these two carcinogens, these nitrosamines and these carcinogens are absent in the plant-based food, and the ultra-processed food, which is also high in additives, emulsifiers, the plastic which is used as the container and all these things, they also lead to development of cancer. In whole food plant-based diet, we avoid ultra-processed food. Chronic inflammation is reduced. Similarly, insulin resistance decreases. Insulin like growth factor, which helps in the promotion of development of these bad and cancer cells, that also reduces with whole food plant-based diet. Thus, with the help of antioxidant effect, anti-inflammatory effect, immunomodulatory effect, whole food plant-based diet reverses all these chronic metabolically disturbed, metabolically active conditions like diabetes, obesity, and thus it helps in cancer prevention.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next question to Dr. Danish. Danish, what do you believe the global medical and sports science community medicine needs to unlearn, especially when it comes to nutrition, recovery, and performance? And how did your time in Africa shape your views on the power of a whole food plant-based approach rooted in tradition and simplicity?
Thank you, Dr. Manali. Well, I'll just give you all a background. I had been in Africa, like how you all have heard about the blue zones. So like I'm into sports, like I deal with athletes. So there are these places in Ethiopia and elsewhere where they produce all Olympians. And it's like a very kind of impoverished background kinds, but then all Olympians are coming from there, particularly in track and field events. And most of the Western Olympians also are those people who have been actually like, imported in a ways, if you can take it. I had this kind of an opportunity to be with them, and I chose to stay with them for over a year. In fact, I had made friends with people there, and we were in a place where there was no electricity. You can imagine. And we have this thing, electricity is like the basic necessity and all. I've enjoyed my stay without electricity for a year, trust me. And thanks. It's like we just had a kind of an oil lamp in the evenings, and circadian rhythm was something which is a byproduct. We get up with the sun, and we used to have some community kind of get together, and only that stars and all, they look so beautiful. In Bombay, we have never seen it. We don't know what it is because of the light pollution. And likewise, what was their diet? They had no excesses. Like say, in the West and all, when athletes are being groomed and all, there is a lot of these machines and equipments and tests and all these things that even I am like, but somewhere I can tell you, these guys had nothing of these. And yet, they would be like the ones who can beat almost anyone on their given day. For schools, they used to actually run to their school. That was the only means possible. They had no vehicles coming in. For the person, my friend out there, if I had to visit his mom was staying in a different village, we had to walk for an hour amongst the wood. There was no other way. And we would enjoy that. And their food, if I can tell you, legumes, they have boiled legumes on a regular basis. A papaya can be a lunch at times, and for us it is like, how can this be like, you need calories and you need proteins, and they have no such concept. And this is it, like how we say like, mutti bhar, that's it, they actually eat less and they thrive on it. They really do well. There is no crap food, sir, there, no calorie rich foods, but foods which are locally grown, locally sourced, very few varieties, not a lot of variety of fruits also. Like what we call as Mosambi, sweet lime. They call it as orange. They have never seen an orange. Means it's always a yellow colored thing. And they say this is orange. And I'm like, no, we don't call this orange. Orange is something different. But for them, 4 fruits, that's it. Avocado was the cheapest fruit. Cheapest. And those young kids would fetch avocados and sell it, and it was like 1 rupee, 1 avocado. Oh, wow. And I would eat a lot of these avocados, and these guys are like, you're crazy, you should be eating a rich man's food. This is poor man's food. This is how they used to see it. And for them, bananas, that was a rich man's food. And they would not have any wastage. Even like say there is a plankton tree, something similar to banana, they would cut open the stem and they would put it in the soil for over a month. It would ferment for a month, imagine. And then they would take it out, make pancakes out of it and eat with it. And I was there when I had been there, I was 72 body weight. And I was 54 within no time. Without doing any active exercises or getting into any diet or anything, and I could run a marathon, which for me earlier was like not possible. It was just the lifestyle, community feeling, the lifestyle, how they were doing it. And when they used to go out, when they would actually go to US and other places for training and all, their performance went down. Imagine. people were coming to find out what is it in these athletic blue zones that they get it. But then when they are taken out with all these high-tech kind of equipments and all these things which are like, given to them, but the performance was coming down. Just a whole food, plant-based and a simple lifestyle, back to nature, being rooted, that is what made the difference.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Danish. My next question is to Dr. Bhojani. Dr. Bhojani, sir, is there any role of evidence-based nutrition in rheumatological diseases as well?
I think I already covered it in terms of the earlier talk itself. So going forward, what I have been doing is in my EMR, I've been using an EMR way before the concept of electronic medical records came. So I designed my own EMR in 2009. And so I've been recording diets since then. Most times I didn't interfere in anybody's diet, except, as I mentioned, spondyloarthropathy. For the last 4 years, and a lot of friends are sitting here, they will vouch for the fact that I am 28 kilos thinner between pre and post COVID. So I went on to the diet bandwagon out of actual compulsion because my daughter was diagnosed to have diabetes during first wave of COVID. And she had to go to London during the first wave of COVID for her university admissions. HbA1c was 11.3. And we had 3 months, so father and daughter decided. So as a father, I believe children do what you do, not what you say. So you live by example. And so I went on a zero carb diet. Anyway, I never had sugars because I'm a type 2 diabetic since 2005. But I went completely off wheat, completely off rice, and we went on to just natural foods. And in 3 months' time, when she flew, her HbA1c was 6.1. And I had lost 17 kilos in 3 months. So that's when I started implementing it on patients. Now, we were always, I am a Gujarati Vaishnav by community, but I have since birth been eating non-vegetarian food. I converted to veg in 2024. But the initial part was essentially I went off all the wheat and everything, and then I went off. So now I'm on plant-based foods. It's going to be 11 and a half months now. And I implemented the same principle in my patients. So what I have been noticing in lupus is, specifically, is that a lot of them tend to get frequent loose motions, and I used to attribute it to side effects of my mycophenolate or my tacrolimus or my cyclosporin, because as a clinician, I believe every time I point one finger at you, 4 are pointing at me. So my method of practice is first look at if there's something wrong in my medications or my problems. And then in the last 1 year, for people whose loose motions didn't improve after I withdrew the drug, I started doing the stool biofires. And trust me, the plethora of the organisms that I'm getting is amazing. And I have now taken them off all kinds of carb-based foods, all kinds of gluten-free foods. I've put them on, and a lot of them are doing much better. As I said, you can't do evidence-based trials on these people. You can't turn around and, tell one patient that I will only keep you on a diet and not treat you. So obviously the standard of care continues, and you can only do a parallel control base. So the patients who refuse to change their diet, they're at liberty. The patients who agree to change to a diet, and I'm just keeping the data. Currently, the trends are all positive.
Thank you, sir.
I want to just add on to what Sir said, because Sir knows dermatology and rheumatology goes together. And I've been seeing a lot of changes in my patients also. I'll give one example onto that. Like, patient came to me for acne, and the patient was also an SLE patient under a rheumatologist. And she was thinking of planning for conception. So all usually in my practice, because I practice in Fortis with loads of commodities, they tell us, cream de do, goliyan mat do. So I said, fine, let me work on the creams. And then I had just started 6 years back, the lifestyle intervention in dermatology. I just asked her to change her diet to add more of fruits, more of vegetables and fiber and all those things. And in 1 month, not only her acne cleared, she told me that her SLE medications were coming down. And then in 2 to 3 months, his rheumatologist said that, now I have put you off a lot of medicines which are barred for obstetrics, and now you can plan to conceive. In 3 to 6 months, her thyroid levels were also starting to improve. So all of these were autoimmune conditions. The acne per se was a hormonal condition, but they all were coming through the leaky gut. And as Dr. Subhashri had said, ask for constipation. Every single patient of mine is either having bloating or acidity or constipation. So this actually is something that we have to work. And there is a doctor, I'm forgetting his name, he has now formulated a system called as HEALS, which is they're saying that, as sir is rightly saying, that when it comes to behavioral changes, the RCTs and all those methods, though China study and Dr. Dean Ornish have proven it time and again, cannot be the benchmark of the behavioral changes studies. So a HEALS system has now come up to figure out how to find out the case control prospectively, cohort studies as well as RCTs, and find out the behavioral interventions, are they changing or not? And we are seeing now publications increasing.
Thank you, Dr. Smriti.
Just to take a leaf out of what Dr. Danish Chenoy said so well, that the same effect of athleticism we see in our country in a very small state called Haryana. And the Haryana is producing, Neeraj Chopras, and it's producing the Fogats and so many other people. And what they have done is, in the city of Ambala, this was a trial which started with the CDC of USA, Center for Disease Control, and PGI Chandigarh. And they fortified the wheat and the rice and everything with B12, iron and folate. And they gave it in antenatal care. And they found that the incidence of a whole lot of problems, anemias and neural tube defects and low birth weights have all changed, plus athletic performance just went up. And that is supposed to be what is called the Haryana effect or the Neeraj Chopra effect. So taking a leaf out of your book from of course we have nowhere near Ethiopian standards, but still we are really progressing on that.
I think we'll take the audience questions for lack of time now.
Good afternoon, respected teachers. What you said, sir, the quality of food which you got there and now what is being practiced in India, here they use urea in order to produce lot of quantity, so the quality deteriorates. I remember my grandfather, who was a farmer, and I used to ask him, how were your days in your time? Because he was just a plain farmer and he was educated till 8th standard. So I said, why didn't you went to education? You could have become a teacher. He said, yeah, but due to some problem. So he said, in his farming, because he was a full farmer, we had bullocks and everything, cows and everything. So he said, with that cow dung, organic farming nowadays people are saying, so with that, he used to get whatever rice and dal for only 10 months' time. So and I said, what about the remaining 2 months? How you used to manage? So he said, we used to get mangoes and all these things. So we used to have a mango field and that. So in today's time, we are depending on farmers. And their farmers, they are thinking their children should become good educated people. So if you go there and see in the farming sector, today even if I go in my place, in my childhood what I used to see is long fields, Now I can hardly see 1 or 2 fields. So in today's time, I don't think we can really get what you are getting there. So only thing what we can do is we can reduce our quantity of food. Normally we think we need to have very high quantity of food. But as science says that the mass of our body, we get deprived of water. as we grow, the water quantity gets decreased.
True, sir. So we can only
little bit of
aspire
that
for
and
a
this-
certain
That is
lifestyle.
what
Yes.
I feel.
We can only
So
aim
it's
for
a
that.
famous quote: eat real food, okay? Not too much, mostly plants. So that is what we have to follow. That is simply whole food plant-based diet. Any other question?
Next question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
For lack of time, please
Yeah.
ask
My
the question.
questions are very basic and ground level questions. It may feel funny also, but my question is, how does the fasting on Ekadashi helps us? Is there any proof for that? That is question one. When we are talking about the plant-based protein, to have 9 grams of protein, we have to consume 100 grams of chana dal or whatever. So consuming so much of legumes, it's too much to comply the required amount of protein. That is my second question. And the third question is potential of food when we cook, that goes down. So is half-cooked food is going to give us better quality of proteins or nutrients? So these are my 3 basic questions, and they are very much important while we cook. Thank you.
These are not basic, ma'am. These are very important questions. I'll answer the first question, which is Ekadashi. It is absolutely true. Like in the blue zones also, we see that the cultures and the way that they have come up, it's from generations of answers. So Ekadashi is now also called as moon diet. It is so famous now in Western countries that many celebrities are following it. We actually traditionally followed it. If you go through the Ekadashi's steps, it's actually a type of circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. And now it is proven. Now I'll tell you what are the steps that we do in Ekadashi and how it improves, right? The ideal is Nirjala fast. So which is now called as dry fasting. And it is done anywhere between 24 to 42 hours. Because we start from one day before, that is Dashami. After lunch, we will not eat anything. Then throughout the Ekadashi, we will not eat. And in the breakfast on the Dwadashi, we will break the fast. That is 42 hours. And that is ideally dry fasting. It is supposedly, it works, as I had mentioned in my talk also, on autophagy, which is the mechanism for autoimmune diseases and carcinogenesis as well. The second, if you can go, is water fasting or coconut water fasting in the Ekadashi, or fruit fasting. So in the fruit fasting and all, also you at least go for 16 to 20 hours of that. That intermittent fasting will work on the insulin sensitivity also, right? If we go for the original Ekadashi fasting, it is said that if you are doing it, say 24 times in a year, you're actually killing out your autoimmune cells. You're supporting your body in getting them out. So this definitely is now being scientifically proven. We have small studies with intermittent fasting till date. We really hope to have RCTs. And we really hope that we Indians together start practicing it more, so that we have multicentric trials on Ekadashi. For the protein question, Dr. Charang will take it.
Just to add on, fasting is a concept in all religions, all traditions, everywhere there is fasting. Unfortunately, over the years, we have modified the concept of fast. So we have these foods जो fasting में चलता है, and many people fast just to have the food. So it's become a counterintuitive whole thing. So true fasting has to be followed in its actual sense, then only you will get the benefits. Moving on to the legumes thing, see, the Eat Lancet study which Dr. Smriti showed, the problem we are having is we are not eating enough legumes, we are not eating enough fruits, we are not eating enough plant-based foods. You think that it is a problem that if you have to eat so much legumes, because we have forgotten that we can eat so many legumes, right? We are used to having a very cereal heavy diet. We have rice and we sprinkle some dal over it. We have 3-4 chapatis. Even, अरे उसने बहुत खाया, 4 चपाती खाया. That is our measure. कि इसने ज़्यादा खाया कि कम खाया. It is measured in terms of how many rotis he has eaten, which is a completely wrong concept. The food plate which is there, 50% has to be fruits and vegetables, 25% has to be legumes, and 25% only has to be your cereals. Ours is almost 60-70% we have cereals only. And that is shown in all the studies. That is what we are eating. 65 to 70% of our proteins are coming from cereals. Right? So that is not the right way. We have to learn. Immediately you may not be able to make the change, but gradually you have to reduce your dependency on cereals and increase your legumes.
May I say something?
anyone wants to
So
address
I
the
will
question on cooking?
May I
Yes,
just
I'm-
say
I'm
something
doing
here?
that.
See, as a rheumatologist, I deal with the majority of my practice is not going to be lupus and scleroderma. By incidence, it's arthritis, which is more, right? And naturally, a lot of them are osteoarthritis. A lot of them. And these patients then get scared when somebody has suggested कि आता गुड़गे बदलावे लगती हैं. So most of the times the people who come to me are obese patients, predominantly females, very poor muscle tone, with a metabolic syndrome, and they've already met an orthopedic surgeon who said that you require a knee replacement. So I am the fallback. It's not that they've come to me to prevent osteoarthritis, it's already beyond moderate. And they have degenerative spines. So it's very interesting, but this is the truth. Most of these patients, and that also is there in my record because I record the ethnicity. So all of them have fatty livers. If you look at their diet, now since I'm a Gujarati and we have a lot of Maharashtrian, a lot of those category patients, you will realize that these so-called vegetarian diets, now the difference, the concept in the brain here, and that's why I intervened when this is talking, during this, and that was my area of interest. The concept is veg versus non-veg. That is crap. It's not veg versus non-veg. Yes, the carbon footprint and all of that, I completely agree with. But I don't want anybody in the audience to go back saying that this thought process is non-veg versus veg. The problem is our nashta is poha, upma, khakra, biscuit, bread, toast. Then we are going to have a lunch of chapati, bhaji, amti, bhat. And your amti is patad. 5 grams of amti. You have no legumes. Most of us Hindus will have protein of twice a week. आठवड्यात दोनदा उसळी असते. This is the reality. It's vegetables, a little bit. We have 2 or 3 chapatis. We have rice. Then in the evening, with tea, you have some biscuit or some toast, which is again carbs. And then you have dinner, which is either khichdi and kadi, or it is amti bhat, or it is variety in Gujaratis. Now do your math. That's what Sharang is talking about, and that's what Smriti is talking about. The fact is, where is the sufficient protein or the balance in the diet? We are completely carb rich, and most of it is processed carb rich. So the fatty liver, so the metabolic syndrome.
And as Sir's prescription also always says that, we are now saying not all carbohydrates are the same. So eliminate your refined carbohydrates and include lots of millets in your diet. They are the complex carbohydrates, the better grains, but yes, 25%. Answering the question of raw, it is now recommended, and I showed you in the plates as well, 50% of your diet has to be fruits and vegetables, more of vegetables, like 4 to 5 vegetable servings per day and 2 to 3 fruits serving per day. Any of the mixture you do, your math, as Dr. Sharang said, your body is very intelligent, but not all of the vegetables can be had raw. So in that sense, it's the culinary sciences that is there. We teach you how to cook the vegetables. There are 2 methods. One is, of course, you can steam them. The other is in a whole plant-based manner. We do not even ask you to have oils. And that is how traditionally in India, if you go to the rural areas, they do. You steam the vegetables, or you'll take it iron ka kadhai. You will dry roast your seeds. And the seed itself will lose its oil there, right? Or you will just crush your peanuts, or you grate your coconuts, or wo neemu ka thoda sa wo karke, that will give you the flavor. And very less mild sauteing with a bhakri. That it's what it is eaten there. The local and the seasonal and the hyper-local foods, when you are taking, that way you are getting rid of all the pesticides aspect as well. But in all your meals, you have to remember 50% becomes the salads, and whatever vegetables you are not able to eat raw, that you cook, but you do not overcook. In India, we cook in oil. इतना सारा पहले तेल डाल देते हैं, उसके बाद उसमें थोड़ा सा सब्जी डालते हैं, वो तेल पीछे तैरता रहता है. That's not how we are supposed to do. There's one more thing that I want you all to look up. It's called as DASH plus legume diet. Now it has been proven for hypertension. We all use DASH diet. The DASH plus legume, the legume included in the DASH diet is more cardioprotective, better for hypertensives compared to the routine DASH diet.
Thank you, Dr. Smriti. Due to lack of time, I think we will be taking the
practical
questions.
question. I need to ask this.
One last question.
One last
please,
question.
No, we are seeing
You
a
can
lot
take
of
the discussion over lunch.
aging population in our country now. And Dr. Sharang, you showed a beautiful plate. If I show it to my patient and say, "Oh, mala chawtas yet nahi." So what will you do then? I mean, what is your prescription then?
Can I, so one of the things which you can suggest is something, green smoothie, which I recommend to all my diabetic retinopathy patients, is you can crush the vegetables, such as, you cannot have that quantity of greens every day, and chewing is a task, even for me. So you can take green leafy vegetables, you can put flaxseed powder and a fruit for flavor. That can also compensate, and without straining, that can compensate for having that kind of large salads. You can have it throughout the day, and it gives you sufficient amount of nutrients. And the best part of crushing is those vitamins, minerals, and the enzymes are easily available for digestion.
I'll just add on to this. We have dal shorba in the lunch for you all. So those who do not have the teeth to crush those dals, also you can have them as soups. And the green smoothies that we are talking about, you can look up the work of Dr. Brooke Goldner. The website is goodbyelupus.com. She herself had SLE and she works on autoimmune diseases, and she recommends those green juices, wherein the greens are not that tasty and palatable, and they don't have the kind of cuisines that we have. So they make the green smoothies, and that can be recommended to those who are having a difficulty.
Thank you. Big thank you to all the panelists and the wonderful audience for actively participating. Lunch has been served, and I request you all to enjoy a whole food plant-based meal. Kindly note, pollution-friendly food has been arranged.